They abandoned him at a gas station. But when they came back begging, the dog made a choice no one expected. In the middle of a cold desert night, a German shepherd was left alone at a quiet gas station, watching red taillights fade into darkness. He waited. Not for food, not for shelter. He waited for the family that never came back. Days later, when the same people returned, begging to take him home, the dog didn't run to them. Instead, he stood still and chose something far more powerful than loyalty. The gas station sat alone at the edge of the highway, a small island of light surrounded by miles of dark New Mexico desert. At that hour, it barely felt real. Just a rectangle of fluorescent glow floating in the vast blackness, humming softly as the wind dragged sand across the asphalt. It was a little past midnight when the SUV slowed and rolled into the station. The dog lifted his head. He had been asleep, curled tight against the concrete base of the ice freezer near the building, his body instinctively tucked inward against the cold. The sound of tires crunching over gravel pulled him awake instantly. His ears rose first, then his head, then his whole body followed, stiff with sudden hope. The SUV stopped beside pump number 3. The engine idled. The dog stood. He was a large German shepherd, older than he once had been. Silver threaded the fur around his muzzle and eyes, and one ear never stood quite straight anymore. Still, there was strength in the way he held himself, in the quiet discipline of a body that had learned long ago to stay close, to wait, to obey. The back door opened. Cool air rushed out, carrying the scent of familiar things, fabric softener, old leather, fast food wrappers, and the people he knew better than himself. A hand reached out. "Come on," a man said, impatient, not unkind, just finished. "Go on." The dog stepped forward, tail already lifting, heart already running ahead of his body. He placed his front paws on the pavement, then the back ones, turning his head to look inside the car as he always did, checking, counting, making sure everyone was still there. The door slammed shut. Hard. The sound echoed sharper than it should have in the open night. The dog startled and lunged back toward the door, nails scraping against metal as he tried to find the handle with his nose, his body pressing forward in confusion. The SUV lurched. Red brake lights flared. For one long second, the dog believed this was a mistake, that the door would open again, that someone would laugh and say his name and tell him to get back in. Instead, the car pulled away. The tires spun briefly, then found the road, and the SUV disappeared down the highway, its lights shrinking until they were nothing more than 2 red dots, swallowed by darkness. The dog ran after it, not far, only a few steps, before instinct stopped him. He halted at the edge of the pavement, chest heaving, ears forward, eyes fixed on the empty road. The desert wind moved through him, cold and dry. He stood there for a long time. Minutes passed, then more. The hum of the station lights filled the silence. Somewhere far off, a truck horn sounded once, then faded. The dog did not whine. He did not bark. He simply waited. Eventually, he lowered himself to the ground, near the pump where the car had been. He lay with his front paws stretched forward, head resting between them, eyes still locked on the road. His tail lay flat and still behind him. Rain began to fall. At first it was light, just enough to darken the pavement, to make the air smell like dust and metal. Then it grew heavier, soaking into his coat, clinging to his fur until it weighed him down. The dog did not move. Every sound made his head lift. Every passing vehicle, rare at that hour, drew his full attention. When headlights appeared in the distance, his ears pricked and his body tensed, ready. But the lights always passed by. Never slowed, never turned in. By the time the rain eased, the dog's fur was wet through, his body shivering faintly now, though he still refused to curl up. He stayed facing the road as if turning away might mean missing the moment they came back. Inside the station, the door opened with a dull chime. Caleb Monroe stepped out, pulling his jacket tighter against the chill. He had worked the night shift at this station for almost 11 years, long enough to recognize every sound it made, every way the desert changed after midnight. He froze when he saw the dog. "Hey," he said softly, more to himself than to the animal. The dog did not look at him. Caleb stood there for a moment, studying the broad back, the soaked fur, the stillness that felt too deliberate to be calm. He followed the line of the dog's gaze to the empty highway and understood immediately. "Damn," he muttered. He went back inside and returned with a bowl of water, setting it a few feet away. Then he placed a wrapped sandwich beside it, unwrapped halfway so the smell could carry. "Go on," Caleb said quietly. "You gotta be hungry." The dog turned his head just enough to acknowledge the sound. He sniffed once, then turned back to the road. Caleb exhaled through his nose and sat down on the curb a short distance away, keeping his space. He had learned over the years not to rush things that were hurting. "Someone'll come back," he said, not entirely believing it. "They usually don't mean it like this." The dog's ears twitched at the word back. Minutes passed. The sandwich remained untouched. Finally, a car drove past without slowing, its headlights cutting briefly across the station. When the light faded and the road went dark again, the dog lowered his head just a little. Only then did he lean forward and take a single bite of the sandwich. Caleb watched, his chest tightening in a way he didn't have a name for. Outside, the desert settled into silence again. And beside pump number 3, the German shepherd lifted his head once more, eyes returning to the road, waiting for a family that would never turn around. Caleb sat on the curb until the chill seeped through the denim of his jeans and into his bones. He should have gone back inside, should have checked the register, should have done the things a man did to keep life from falling apart. But he stayed out there because the dog stayed out there, and something in Caleb, some old bruised place that never quite healed, recognized the shape of that stubborn waiting. He finally stood and brushed grit from his palms. "All right," he said, voice low, careful. "I gotta work. You do what you're gonna do." The dog's eyes tracked the road, not Caleb. Caleb went inside. The station door chimed shut. The fluorescent lights made everything look too clean and too tired at the same time. He wiped down the counter, restocked a small rack of chips, pretended he didn't keep glancing at the front window every few seconds. Through the glass, the dog remained a dark shape near pump 3, rainwater still dripping off his coat in slow, steady lines. When dawn arrived, it did not bring warmth. New Mexico mornings could be cruel like that, bright without mercy, the sky wide and pale, the wind sharp enough to cut. The clouds broke apart into thin streaks, and the desert looked washed and empty, as if the night had scrubbed it clean. Caleb brewed a fresh pot of coffee and poured himself a cup he didn't want. He carried another bowl out, this one with kibble he dug out of his own lunch bag. He didn't have dog food. He had a handful of dry pieces from a neighbor's old mutt, left over from a time when someone else had needed help. Caleb set the bowl down and backed away. The dog sniffed it, ate a little more than he had the night before, then returned to the same position, body facing the highway, ears alert, spine held stiff like a man standing guard. Caleb watched him for a long moment. "You don't even know me," he murmured, "and you're still choosing the road." That first day crawled. A few cars stopped for fuel, most of them strangers passing through. A couple from Arizona bought jerky and lottery tickets. A tired woman with mascara smudged under her eyes asked for directions to Albuquerque. A teenager in a baseball cap took a photo of the dog from his passenger window, laughed softly, and drove away. The dog rose every time a vehicle approached, not with excitement exactly, more like a reflex, like his body had been trained to stand when hope showed its face. He scanned each driver's silhouette, each shape in the passenger seat, searching for the familiar outline of someone he'd trusted. Each time the car pulled away, the dog sat again, slower than before. Around midday, the owner of a delivery truck leaned against the station wall and nodded toward the dog. "Yours?" he asked. Caleb shook his head. "No." "Someone ditch him?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He watched the dog's ears twitch at the sound of voices. The animal stayed still, but the muscles along his shoulders tightened. "Looks that way," Caleb said finally. The truck driver whistled. "People are something else." He dug in his pocket and tossed a strip of beef jerky near the dog. The dog sniffed it, took a bite, chewed slowly, then looked away again, gaze drifting back to the road like it was the only truth left. The truck driver frowned. Damn, he's not hungry. He's stuck. Caleb felt his jaw tighten, because the word stuck landed too close to home. Later, a county cruiser rolled in, tires crunching over gravel. The sheriff wasn't in it, just Deputy Marla Keene, the kind of woman who always looked like she'd slept in her uniform and didn't care who knew it. She stepped out, adjusted her belt, and stared at the dog with a flat expression that softened at the edges. "Morning, Caleb," she called. "It's afternoon," Caleb said. Marla smirked and walked toward the window, scanning the dog the way she scanned everything, like she didn't trust the world to tell the truth on its own. "He been here since last night?" Caleb nodded. "Showed up sometime after midnight." Marla crouched a few feet away, not reaching. "Hey, buddy," she said, the words practiced, gentle. "You got a tag? Anything?" The dog didn't flinch, but he didn't lean toward her either. He kept his head angled so one eye could watch her while the other stayed on the highway. That split focus made Caleb's chest feel tight. The dog wasn't just waiting. He was balancing fear and hope like they were weights he couldn't put down. Marla stood, sighing. "You call animal control?" Caleb shook his head again. "Not yet." Marla's gaze flicked to him. "Why?" Caleb could have said a dozen things. That shelters were loud, that cages smelled like endings, that the dog looked like he'd already been through enough, that Caleb couldn't stand the thought of this animal losing the last thing he still believed in, even if it was a lie. Instead, he said, "He's not hurting anyone." Marla studied him for a beat longer than necessary. Then she nodded once. "All right, I'll make a note," she said, "but you can't keep him here forever." Caleb felt something in him go stubborn. "I'm not keeping him. He's choosing to stay." Marla's mouth twitched like she almost smiled. "That's so?" Caleb didn't respond. He watched the dog rise again as a sedan slowed in the distance. The dog's tail lifted half an inch. His body leaned forward. The sedan passed by without turning in. The tail fell. Marla followed Caleb's gaze. "Yeah," she said quietly, "I see it." She walked back to her cruiser, then stopped and turned again. "Caleb, if you need help, you tell me, Chmay." Caleb's hand tightened around the coffee cup he'd forgotten he was holding. "I'm fine." Marla didn't argue. She just looked at the dog one more time, then drove away. By evening, the wind sharpened again, dragging cold air across the pumps. Caleb placed a folded blanket near the wall by the store entrance where the dog could stay dry if he wanted. He didn't push it. He just set it down like an offering. The dog stared at it for a long time. Then, inch by inch, he shifted, still facing the road, until he was close enough to let the blanket touch his side. He didn't lie on it. He lay beside it, as if he didn't trust comfort yet, but couldn't deny the need for warmth. Caleb turned off the open sign and locked the door at 10. He left the inside lights on low. The station felt smaller in the dark, like the building itself was holding its breath. He carried a flashlight outside and stood near the dog, careful to keep his body angled away. No pressure, no demand. "You're safe here tonight," Caleb said. The dog's ears flicked. His eyes stayed on the road. Caleb exhaled and looked down at the dog's collar for the first time. It was a heavy nylon collar, worn but not cheap. No tag, no nameplate, just a thick strap and a metal buckle that looked too new for the rest of it, like someone had replaced the hardware recently. Caleb didn't touch it. But he noticed something else, how the collar sat oddly, slightly raised on one side, like there was padding where padding didn't need to be. He told himself it was nothing. A seam, a fold. Still, he couldn't stop staring. He stepped back and started toward the door, then paused, glancing over his shoulder. "Listen," he said softly, "I'm closing up, but I'll be right inside. If you need something, you make noise." The dog finally turned his head and looked directly at Caleb. Not pleading, not begging, just looking, as if weighing whether this human was real or another temporary illusion. Caleb held the gaze, then nodded once like a promise. Inside, he sat behind the counter with a book he wasn't reading. The station's low hum filled the air. Every few minutes, he checked the window. The dog stayed where he was, still, vigilant, a silent figure guarding the edge of the light. Sometime after midnight, headlights appeared far down the highway. They slowed, turned. A car rolled into the station and stopped beside Pump 2. Caleb's spine straightened. Outside, the dog rose so fast his nails clicked against the pavement. His body went rigid. For a fraction of a second, hope flashed through him like lightning, raw, uncontrollable. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, hesitated, and looked around like he wasn't sure he belonged there. He wore a dark jacket and kept his hands tucked tight in his pockets. The dog moved forward, cautious now, sniffing the air. Caleb watched from behind the glass, heart thudding. The man's eyes landed on the German shepherd. He froze. Then he took one step closer and called out, voice strained and unnatural, like he was trying to sound tender and failing. "Hey, boy," the man said, swallowing. "It's okay. Come here." The dog stopped. Not in fear. In something colder than fear. Recognition without trust. Caleb opened the door and stepped out into the wind, his voice firm without being loud. "Can I help you?" he asked. The man looked at Caleb, then back at the dog, and licked his lips like he was rehearsing a line. "Yeah," he said. "Actually, we've been looking for him. That's our dog." The man's voice hung in the air, thin and uncertain, as if even he didn't believe the words he'd just spoken. Caleb didn't answer right away. He stood between the man and the dog without meaning to, his body shifting into place on instinct. Years of quiet nights had taught him how to read people in half a second. The way they stood, the way they breathed, the way their eyes moved when they thought no one was watching. This man's eyes never settled on the dog for long. They kept flicking past him. To the building, to the pumps, to the shadows near the edge of the lot. "Our dog," the man repeated, louder this time, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "He must have slipped out. We've been worried sick." Behind him, the passenger door opened. A woman stepped out, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. She was younger than Caleb had expected, with carefully styled hair and a scarf that looked too clean for a midnight drive. She glanced at the dog, then quickly away, as if the sight made her uncomfortable. "Oh, my God," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "There you are." The dog did not move. He stood with his legs braced, head high, ears forward, but tight. His tail hung low, not tucked, not wagging. His eyes stayed locked on the man's face, sharp and searching, like he was listening for a sound that never came. Caleb felt it then, the quiet certainty settling in his gut. This wasn't relief. This was calculation. "How'd you find him?" Caleb asked. The man hesitated. Someone posted online, said there was a shepherd hanging around the station." Caleb nodded slowly. "Funny. Haven't seen anyone post anything." The woman shot the man a quick look. We just heard," she said. "Word travels fast in small places." Caleb didn't step aside. The man cleared his throat. "Look, sir, I appreciate you keeping an eye on him, but he's ours. We should take him home." At the word home, the dog's ears flicked back. Not fear, memory. Something old and heavy passed behind his eyes, like a door closing quietly inside him. The woman took a tentative step forward. "Come here, buddy," she said, her voice rising into a practiced sweetness. "You remember me, right?" She reached out her hand. The dog took one step back, not away from Caleb, behind him. Caleb felt the weight of that choice like a hand on his spine. "He doesn't seem eager," Caleb said. "He's probably scared," the man snapped, impatience breaking through. "Dogs get confused." "Or they remember," Caleb replied. The man's jaw tightened. "Are you accusing us of something?" Caleb shrugged. "I'm saying he was left here in the middle of the night, wet, hungry, waiting." The woman's eyes flashed. "That's not fair. You don't know what happened." Caleb looked at the dog. The stiff way he stood, the way his gaze never left them, the way he leaned just slightly into Caleb's leg, grounding himself. "I know what didn't happen," Caleb said quietly. You didn't come back." The man let out a sharp laugh. "This is ridiculous. We're taking him." He stepped forward. The dog growled. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was deep, steady, and unmistakable. The sound stopped the man cold. The woman gasped. "See? He's aggressive. That's why—" "Why what?" Caleb cut in. The man swallowed. "Why we had to make a hard choice." The words landed wrong, too rehearsed, too clean. Caleb's eyes dropped, just for a moment, to the dog's collar. Up close, the collar looked even stranger than before. The stitching on one side was newer, darker, as if it had been opened and re-sewn. The padding beneath it bulged slightly, unevenly. Caleb frowned. The man noticed. "You don't need to look at that," he said quickly. Caleb looked back up. "Why not?" The man's face flushed. "It's private property." Caleb straightened. So is the dog. Silence stretched between them. The wind swept across the lot, rattling the empty trash can near the ice machine. The woman's voice softened. "Please," she said, and this time it sounded closer to real. "We made a mistake. Everyone does. We just want to fix it." The dog's growl faded, but he didn't relax. His eyes stayed dark, unreadable. Caleb watched them both. He thought of the way the dog had waited, the way he'd eaten only when hope was gone, the way he'd chosen a blanket without choosing comfort. "You can't just show up days later and decide you're ready," Caleb said. The man's patience snapped. "You don't get to decide that." Before Caleb could respond, headlights flared at the edge of the lot. Another vehicle pulled in, slow and deliberate. Deputy Marla Keene stepped out of her cruiser, one eyebrow already raised. "Well," she said, hands resting casually on her belt, "this looks familiar." The man stiffened. "Is there a problem, officer?" Marla glanced at the dog, then at Caleb. She took in the scene, the distance between bodies, the tension hanging like static. "What's going on?" she asked. Caleb didn't hesitate. "They say it's their dog." Marla studied the couple. "And is it?" The man nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." Marla looked at the dog. "He sure doesn't look like he recognizes you." "He's stressed," the woman said. "We just want to take him home." Marla tilted her head. "Funny thing about dogs," she said mildly, "they tend to know where home is." The man shifted his weight. "Are you going to let us take him or not?" Marla's gaze hardened a fraction. "Do you have proof of ownership?" The man hesitated again. "We don't carry paperwork around." Marla sighed. "Photos?" Another pause, longer this time. The woman spoke quickly. "Our phones were lost." Caleb almost laughed, but the sound stayed trapped in his chest. Marla nodded slowly, as if considering. "Then here's how this works," she said. "You can come back tomorrow with documentation, vet records, microchip registration, something." The man's voice sharpened. "And until then?" "Until then," Marla said, "the dog stays here." The dog leaned into Caleb's leg again, just enough to be felt. The man's face darkened. "This isn't over." "No," Marla agreed, "it's not." The woman looked at the dog one last time. For a split second, something flickered across her face. Regret, maybe, or guilt. Then it was gone, replaced by annoyance. They got back into the car. The engine started. Gravel spat beneath the tires as they pulled away. The dog watched them go, but this time he didn't run forward. He stayed where he was, steady and grounded, his body pressed lightly against Caleb's side. Caleb exhaled, not realizing he'd been holding his breath. Marla looked at him. "You okay?" Caleb nodded. "Yeah." She glanced at the collar again. "Something about them feels off." Caleb followed her gaze. "I noticed." Marla straightened. "I'll check the cameras, see what I can find." She paused, then added, "You did good tonight." Caleb didn't answer. He looked down at the dog instead. The dog lifted his head and met Caleb's eyes. Not pleading, not afraid, just present. Caleb reached out slowly and rested his hand on the dog's broad shoulder. The dog didn't flinch. "Looks like you're staying," Caleb said softly. The dog didn't wag his tail, but he didn't move away either. Caleb's hand stayed on the dog's shoulder longer than he meant it to, as if the warmth beneath that wet fur was the only thing in the world that felt steady. The dog's muscles were rigid at first. Then, slowly, almost reluctantly, he let the tension ease, not into comfort, but into a wary truce. Marla watched the small exchange with an expression Caleb couldn't read. Then she jerked her chin toward the office. "Come on," she said. "Let's see what the cameras say." The station's back room smelled like old coffee, motor oil, and cardboard. A small monitor sat on a metal shelf beside the safe, its screen divided into grainy angles. Pumps, parking lot front door, highway edge. Caleb had never paid much attention to it. The station had never needed more than a quiet alarm and common sense. Marla leaned in, tapping the controls with quick, practiced fingers. "You got footage saved?" she asked. "Couple weeks, I think," Caleb said. Marla rewound. The timeline crawled backward in jerky, muted frames. The lot on the screen looked like a different world, flat, pale, and silent, with no sound except the hum of the machine in the room and Marla's steady breathing. "There," she said. The timestamp read the night the dog arrived. Pump 3, a dark SUV. The back door opened. Caleb felt his chest tighten as he watched the dog step out, then pivot in confusion as if the ground had disappeared under him. Even without sound, the moment hit hard, sharp as a slap. The door closed. The SUV rolled forward. The dog lunged after it, then stopped at the edge of the light, frozen. Marla exhaled slowly. "Yeah," she said, "that's not slipped out. That's a dump." She rewound again and paused, staring at the figures in the front seats when the interior light blinked on. The man's profile showed for half a second. The woman's hair caught the glow. Marla pulled out her phone, took a quick photo of the screen. "That'll help," she said. Caleb didn't speak. He couldn't stop watching the dog on the screen, how he stood there as if the world was supposed to make sense and simply didn't. Marla fast-forwarded to the next morning. The dog remained in the same area, moving only when vehicles came in, hours of waiting compressed into seconds. "You've been feeding him," Marla said, not a question. Caleb nodded. Marla glanced at him. "You planning on naming him?" Caleb's mouth twitched. "Feels like naming someone who might leave." Marla's gaze softened just a fraction. "Or someone who's already been left." Caleb looked away. Marla rewound again and paused, focusing on the dog's collar in the overhead camera angle. Even pixelated, she noticed it too, the strange lift on one side, the slight bulge. "That collar," she murmured. "It's not sitting right." Caleb nodded once. "I saw it." Marla straightened. "You touch it?" "No." "Good," Marla said. "Don't, not yet." Caleb frowned. "Why?" Marla's eyes stayed on the screen. "Because sometimes people come back for the wrong reasons." The words landed heavy in the little room. Caleb didn't ask what she meant. He didn't have to. He'd seen the man's eyes flick around the lot, the woman's discomfort. The way the word property came out of the man's mouth like a threat. Marla shut off the monitor and slipped her phone back in her pocket. "I'm going to run their plates if they show up again. But we can also pull the plates from this footage if it's clear enough." Caleb followed her out to the front, where the dog stood near the entrance, the blanket still beside him like a quiet invitation he hadn't fully accepted. Marla approached slowly, crouching a few feet away. "Hey, big guy," she said. "You did good not going with them." The dog watched her, calm but alert. Marla didn't reach out. Instead, she took off her glove and held her palm up, open, patient. The dog sniffed the air, then turned his head slightly, not rejecting her, but not giving in either. Marla rose. "He's got manners," she said, "like he was trained." Caleb looked at the dog's posture, the way his body stayed positioned between the building and the open lot. "He's a guard dog," Caleb said. Marla shook her head. "No, he's not guarding the station. He's guarding you." Caleb let out a quiet, humorless breath. "That's a lot to put on an animal." Marla's expression didn't change. Animals don't ask if they can carry weight, they just do. She walked to her cruiser, then paused before getting in. "If they come back tomorrow, call me. Don't try to handle it alone." Caleb nodded. Marla drove off, tail lights fading into the highway's dark ribbon. The desert returned to stillness, the station lights buzzing softly above the pumps. Caleb went back inside to finish closing tasks he'd ignored. He swept the floor, wiped the counter, refilled the coffee that nobody would buy at this hour. But his mind kept drifting back to the footage, the moment the dog stepped out, expecting safety, receiving abandonment. When he finally turned off most of the lights, he paused by the window. The dog hadn't moved, but he wasn't staring down the highway now. He was watching the door. Caleb stepped outside slowly, hands visible, voice low. "You want in?" he asked, then immediately felt foolish. Dogs didn't understand the rules of humans. Inside, outside, allowed, not allowed. All the dog understood was risk. Caleb opened the door and stood back, leaving space like Marla had. The dog looked at the doorway, then at Caleb. A long moment passed. Wind moved across the lot, tugging at the edges of the blanket. Somewhere far out, a coyote called once, high and lonely, then fell silent. The dog took one careful step forward, then another. His nails clicked against the tile as he crossed the threshold like a soldier entering unfamiliar territory. He didn't rush. He didn't shake water all over the place like a young dog would. He moved with dignity, even in exhaustion, and paused near the entrance, as if waiting for permission that would never come. Caleb's throat tightened. "It's fine," Caleb said softly. "You're fine." The dog finally lowered himself onto the floor, just inside the door, body angled so he could still see out the front window. He rested his head on his paws, eyes half open. Caleb went to the back room and returned with an old towel. He set it down near the dog, not touching him, just placing it within reach. The dog stared at the towel for a moment, then shifted onto it slowly, like accepting a gift without admitting it mattered. Caleb sat behind the counter again, the book still unread. He watched the dog's breathing begin to deepen, the tremor in his ribs easing. For the first time since Caleb had found him, the dog's eyes closed fully. Not sleep like surrender, sleep like trust, even if it was small and fragile. Hours passed. The station remained quiet. No cars pulled in. No voices rose from the highway. Just the steady hum of lights and the soft rhythm of a tired animal finally letting his guard drop. Caleb didn't know when he started talking, but at some point his voice filled the silence like a confession. "I had a kid," he said quietly, staring at the dark glass of the window. "A boy. He used to fall asleep in the back seat on road trips, head against the window, drool down his chin. I'd complain about it, pretend it bothered me." The dog's ears twitched once, but his eyes stayed closed. Caleb swallowed. "He's gone now, and I keep this place running because it's something I can fix. Pumps, lights, locks, simple things." His voice lowered further. "But you're not simple." The dog didn't move, but Caleb felt like he was being heard anyway. Caleb stood, walked around the counter, and stopped near the dog's collar. Up close, the uneven padding looked even more obvious. A ridge under the fabric. A seam that didn't match the rest. Caleb's hand hovered for half a second. He pulled it back. Marla's warning echoed in his mind. Don't. Not yet. Caleb returned to the counter, jaw tight. Outside, the night deepened again, the desert stretching endless and indifferent beyond the station's small glow. Then headlights appeared, far down the highway. Slow. Deliberate. Caleb's shoulders tightened. The dog's eyes opened immediately, clear and sharp, like he'd never truly slept at all. The lights turned in. A car rolled into the lot and stopped. Caleb's stomach dropped when he recognized the shape of it in the glare. The same SUV. The dog rose silently, moving to stand beside Caleb without hesitation, his body aligned with Caleb's like they'd rehearsed it. Caleb's voice came out low and steady, more promise than question. "You stay behind me," he whispered. The dog's throat rumbled once, deep and quiet, as if answering, "No." The SUV idled at Pump 3 again, like it was trying to reclaim the shape of the night it had erased. Its headlights washed the storefront in harsh white, flattening everything. Caleb's face, the dog's body, the small towel on the floor that had become a quiet border between safety and the world outside. Caleb didn't move to open the door. Neither did the dog. The driver's door swung open and the man stepped out, the same dark jacket, the same restless eyes. This time he didn't hesitate. He walked toward the entrance with a confidence that felt forced, like he was wearing it because he had to. The woman followed, scarf wrapped tighter, hair still too neat for midnight. She kept her hands visible, palms slightly open. An acting choice, Caleb thought, a gesture meant to say, "We're not here to fight." The dog's body hardened, shoulders squared, head high. But he didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply stood, a quiet wall of muscle and memory, beside Caleb. The bell above the door chimed when Caleb finally opened it. Only a few inches, chain lock still latched. Cold air poured in. "We came back," the woman said quickly, voice trembling in a way that might have fooled someone who wanted to be fooled. We couldn't sleep. We've been sick about it." Caleb's gaze stayed on the man. About what? The man's eyes flicked to the dog, then away. "We messed up," he said. "We were in a bad place. Things got complicated." "Complicated doesn't leave a dog on concrete in the rain," Caleb replied. The woman swallowed. "Please," she whispered, "just let us see him." The man stepped closer, and Caleb saw it immediately, the impatience vibrating under his skin, the way his jaw worked when he didn't get what he wanted fast enough. "Buddy," the man called softly through the gap in the door. "Come here, it's me." The dog did not move. He stared at the man with a stillness that felt like judgment. The woman's voice cracked. "He's confused," she said, eyes shining. "He thinks we abandoned him. He doesn't understand." Caleb tightened his grip on the door edge. "He understands plenty." The man's smile thinned. "Look, we're not here to argue. We just want to take him home. We brought his leash." He lifted something in his hand. A leash? Yes, brand new. The nylon still stiff, the metal clip shining like it had never touched a collar in its life. Caleb felt his throat tighten in disgust. "You think buying a leash is an apology?" The woman's eyes darted past Caleb into the store, past the counter, past the shelves, as if she was scanning for something. The dog noticed, too. He shifted slightly, placing his body closer to the inside, angling himself so his shoulder blocked the woman's view deeper into the station. It was subtle, a guard move, not aggression, positioning. Caleb's heartbeat slowed, the way it did when something dangerous finally made sense. "You're not here for him," Caleb said quietly. The man's face hardened. "What?" Caleb nodded toward the dog's collar. "You keep looking at that." The woman's mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time since they arrived, the man's eyes went sharp, cold. The mask slipped just a fraction. "That collar belongs to us," he said. "Everything on that dog belongs to us." Caleb stared at him. "A living thing doesn't belong to you." The man's nostrils flared. "You're a gas station clerk. Don't get philosophical." The dog's throat rumbled, low, controlled, warning. The woman flinched. "Please," she said again, voice smaller now, more urgent than emotional. "We don't want trouble. Just give him to us and we'll go. We'll forget this happened." Caleb laughed once, bitter. "Forget you dumped him?" The man leaned in close to the crack of the door, lowering his voice. "Listen, you can make this easy or you can make it hard." Caleb didn't blink. "Are you threatening me?" The man's smile returned, but it was dead. "I'm telling you how the world works." Behind Caleb, the dog took one slow step forward. Not toward the couple, toward the doorframe, planting his weight like an anchor. His presence filled the space, turning the narrow entry into something impossible to cross. The woman's eyes glistened again. She put her hand over her mouth and began to cry, soft at first, then harder. "I can't believe this," she sobbed. "He's our family. We raised him. We're sorry. We're so sorry." The sound might have broken a softer heart. It didn't touch the dog. He watched her cry the way he watched the road, silent, skeptical, unmoved. Caleb's jaw clenched. He had seen grief before. Real grief didn't perform. Real grief didn't check whether anyone was watching. The man reached up and pressed his forehead against the glass, voice suddenly pleading. "Please, I'm begging you, man. My kid keeps asking for him." Caleb held the man's gaze. "Where was your kid when you left him here?" The man's eyes flicked away. Caleb knew. He could see it like a ghost on the security footage. Someone in the passenger seat, a small shape, a child who had watched, who had learned. The woman, sobbing, faltered. She wiped her face, eyes darting again into the store, more openly now. "We just need to take him," she whispered. "We can't." She stopped herself. Caleb leaned forward slightly. "You can't what?" The man's hand slammed flat against the glass. "Enough!" The sound cracked through the quiet store like a gunshot. The dog's muscles bunched. His lips lifted just enough to show teeth, not snapping, not lunging, but making a point. The woman recoiled. Caleb didn't move. His voice came out calm, almost tired. "You're not taking him." The man stared at Caleb, breathing hard. Then, like flipping a switch, his shoulders dropped. His face rearranged itself into desperation again. He sank to his knees on the wet pavement outside the door. Caleb's stomach turned. The performance was so sudden, so calculated, it felt obscene. The man's voice broke. "Please," he whispered. "Please. Just let us have him back. I'll do anything." The dog stared down at him, unmoving. The man looked up at the dog with wide eyes, and for the first time he said something that sounded like it might have been real. "August," he whispered. The name hit the room like a cold gust. Caleb froze. The dog froze too, only for a heartbeat. His ears twitched, his head tilting slightly as if the sound opened an old door in his memory. A name meant he had once belonged somewhere, meant someone had spoken to him with affection, maybe once. But then something else happened. The dog's gaze shifted, away from the man on the ground. He looked at Caleb. It wasn't a look of confusion. It was a question. A silent, steady, "What now?" Caleb's throat tightened so hard it hurt. He swallowed, feeling the weight of that question settle on him like responsibility he hadn't asked for but couldn't refuse. He leaned closer to the glass, voice low enough that the man could barely hear it. "You don't get to say his name like it's a key," Caleb said. "You don't get to unlock him when you're ready." The man's face twisted. "You think you're his savior?" Caleb shook his head. "No, I think he saved himself." The woman crouched beside the man, whispering urgently, but Caleb couldn't hear the words. The dog could. His ears flicked, tracking them, measuring tone and intent. The man rose from his knees, wiping his face with his sleeve. He looked up at Caleb with a final attempt at softness. "Just open the door," he said. "Let him come to us." Caleb glanced down. The dog didn't step forward. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't whine. He simply stood beside Caleb, solid as stone. Caleb exhaled slowly and said the words that felt both cruel and necessary. He already chose. The man stared at the dog, anger and panic wrestling inside him. Then his eyes dropped, again, to the collar. "Fine," the man said, voice sharpening. "Then give me the collar." Caleb's heart thudded. The woman's eyes flashed with relief too quick to hide. Caleb's voice went flat. "Now we're telling the truth." The man stepped closer. "That collar is ours. It has things in it that don't belong to you." Caleb didn't ask what things. He didn't need to. The way the man said it, like a warning, told Caleb whatever was hidden in that collar was valuable enough to drag them back here at midnight, valuable enough to make them beg and threaten and kneel on wet pavement. Caleb's hand moved unconsciously toward his phone in his pocket. The dog shifted, positioning himself between the door and the couple, eyes locked on the man's hands. Caleb's voice came out quiet. "I'm calling the police." The man's face drained of color. "Don't." Caleb held his gaze. "You shouldn't have come back." Outside, wind swept across the lot, and somewhere in the distance a siren sounded faintly. Far away, not yet for them, but moving through the night like a warning traveling toward its target. The man backed up one step, then another, shaking his head as if Caleb had betrayed him. "This isn't over," he said again, but this time the words sounded less like a threat and more like fear. He grabbed the woman's arm. They turned quickly, hurried back to the SUV. The engine roared to life. Tires spit gravel as they backed out too fast, then shot onto the highway, disappearing into the dark like they were being chased. Caleb stood in the doorway, the chain lock still latched, watching tail lights vanish. Only when the night swallowed them completely did he feel the tremor in his own hands. He closed the door, locked it, and leaned his forehead against the glass for a moment. Behind him the dog let out a slow breath. Caleb turned. The German shepherd stood there, calm again. But his eyes were different, older, heavier, as if hearing his name from that man had peeled back a layer of something he'd tried to bury. Caleb took a step closer, careful, and spoke softly, not sure if the dog understood words or only intention. "You don't owe them anything," Caleb said. The dog's gaze held steady on Caleb's face. Then, very slowly, the dog lowered his head, not in submission, but in exhaustion, and pressed the side of his neck, collar and all, gently against Caleb's thigh. It was the closest thing to trust Caleb had ever seen from him. Caleb's breath caught. He reached down and rested his hand over the collar, not gripping it, just feeling it, feeling the strange ridge beneath the fabric that shouldn't have been there. A secret hidden against a loyal throat. Caleb's fingers trembled, and he pulled his hand back before he could do something irreversible. He swallowed hard and whispered into the quiet store, more to himself than to the dog. "Tomorrow," he promised, "we'll figure out what they're really after." Caleb didn't sleep. He sat behind the counter with his jacket still on, the lights dimmed low enough to keep the station from feeling like an interrogation room. Outside, the desert stretched flat and indifferent, the highway whispering occasionally when a distant truck passed through the night. August lay near the door, body turned inward now, no longer facing the road. His breathing was slow, measured, but he wasn't fully asleep. Every so often his ears twitched, tracking sounds only he could hear. Whatever the man had woken by saying his name hadn't gone back to rest. Caleb watched him from a distance. The collar sat heavy around August's neck, the fabric worn smooth in places by time and loyalty. That uneven ridge pressed faintly against the fur, a secret stitched into something meant to be simple. Caleb hated that thought. That trust could be used as storage, that devotion could be made into a hiding place. He reached for his phone and typed a message with hands that felt clumsy. They came back. Again. They want the collar. The response came faster than he expected. "Don't touch it. I'm on my way." Marla Caleb leaned back and stared at the ceiling, counting breaths. When he looked down again, August was watching him, eyes open and steady. "It's okay," Caleb said quietly, not sure who the words were for. "You're not in trouble." August shifted and rested his chin on his paws, gaze never leaving Caleb's face. It felt like being measured. Not judged exactly, but evaluated, as if August was deciding whether this man would still be standing when the night tried to take something else away. Marla arrived just before dawn, her cruiser rolling in without sirens, tires crunching soft on gravel. She didn't bother with small talk. She stepped inside, took one look at Caleb's face, then at the dog. "They tried to play you," she said. "They tried," Caleb replied. Marla knelt a few feet from August and let him sniff her hand again. This time he did more than acknowledge her. He leaned forward a fraction, nose brushing her knuckles, then pulled back. Permission, not surrender. "Good boy," Marla murmured. She stood and looked at Caleb. "All right, here's how we do this." She put on gloves from her cruiser and set a clean towel on the floor. Her movements were careful, precise. "If there's something hidden in that collar, it needs to be documented. Chain of custody matters." Caleb nodded. His mouth felt dry. "He won't like it." Marla met his eyes. "He doesn't have to like it. He has to be safe." Caleb crouched and spoke softly to August, keeping his voice low and even. "I need you to stay still," he said, "just for a minute." August didn't lie down, but he didn't pull away either. He stood, body tense, eyes flicking between Marla and Caleb. When Marla reached toward the buckle, August flinched, but then he leaned just slightly into Caleb's knee. Caleb's chest tightened. Marla worked quickly. The buckle came loose. The collar slid free into her hands. August shook himself once, hard, as if shedding something heavier than fabric. He stepped back immediately, then returned to Caleb's side, pressing close, his neck bare and vulnerable in the cool air. Marla turned the collar over and examined the stitching. "Yeah," she said, "this was opened." She used a small blade from her kit and carefully cut along the newer seam. The padding parted, revealing a slim plastic sleeve tucked inside, watertight, sealed. Caleb felt his pulse in his throat. Marla slid the sleeve free and held it up. Inside was a tiny flash drive, black and unmarked. "Well," she said softly, "that explains the begging." Caleb let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "What's on it?" Marla shook her head. "We don't check it here. We log it, then we hand it over." Caleb watched August, who was staring at the collar, now lying empty on the towel. His ears tilted forward, confused. Something that had been part of him, something he'd carried through abandonment and hunger, was suddenly gone. Marla noticed. She folded the collar carefully and set it aside. "We'll keep this with the evidence, but he doesn't need it anymore." Caleb nodded, then reached out and rested his hand on August's shoulder. "You did your job," he said quietly, "even if you didn't know it." Marla stood and pulled out her radio. "I'm calling this in. Those two aren't just cruel, they're stupid. Using a dog like that leaves a trail." She paused, looking at Caleb. "They came back because they thought you were small." Caleb's mouth tightened. "I am." Marla shook her head. "No, you're just not loud." The morning brightened the edges of the station, turning the sky pale and wide. When the paperwork was done and the flash drive sealed away, Marla lingered. "There's something else," she said. "Given the footage and the abandonment, Animal Services will get involved. They'll want to place him." Caleb's stomach dropped. "Place him where?" Marla didn't soften it. "A shelter, foster, somewhere temporary." Caleb looked down at August. The word temporary felt like another door slamming. August lifted his head and met Caleb's eyes, as if sensing the shift. His tail stayed still, but his body leaned in again, steady and deliberate. Caleb swallowed. He doesn't do well with doors closing. Marla studied the dog, then Caleb. "You asking me something?" Caleb hesitated. He hadn't planned for this moment. He'd told himself he was just keeping August safe, just long enough for the truth to surface. He hadn't admitted out loud that the station felt different with August in it, quieter, fuller. "I don't know how long I can keep him," Caleb said, "but I know how much worse it'll be if he's moved again." Marla nodded slowly. "I can arrange a temporary hold, with you, if you're willing." Caleb exhaled, something uncoiling in his chest. "I'm willing." Marla's mouth curved into a small, tired smile. "All right then." She headed for the door, then stopped and looked back. "One more thing. If they come back, and they will, don't engage. Call me." Caleb nodded. Marla left, her cruiser fading into the morning traffic. The station felt quieter without her, the hum returning to its usual low song. Caleb knelt and picked up the folded collar. He held it for a moment, then set it on the counter, out of August's reach. August watched, then turned away from it, eyes drifting to the window. The road outside was already busy, cars coming and going, like nothing had changed. Caleb crouched and spoke softly. "You don't have to wait any more." August didn't respond with movement, but after a moment he turned his head and rested it against Caleb's thigh again, heavier this time, like he meant to stay. Caleb closed his eyes and let the weight settle. Later that afternoon, a white SUV slowed as it passed the station. It didn't turn in. Caleb saw it in the reflection of the glass, the way it crept by, watching. August noticed, too. His ears lifted, his posture tightening, but he didn't rise. He didn't run to the door. He stayed where he was. Caleb felt something click into place then, quiet and final. Whatever those people had tried to reclaim, they weren't getting it back. Not the flash drive, not the collar, and not the dog who had carried their secrets without ever knowing why. Caleb reached down and scratched gently behind August's ear, testing a kindness he hadn't earned yet. August sighed, a low, steady sound, and leaned closer. Outside, the SUV disappeared down the highway, leaving only dust and distance behind. The days that followed settled into a strange, careful rhythm. August stayed, not in the way a guest stayed, hovering near the edges, waiting to be told where to lie, but in the way something living decided a place was worth breathing in. He learned the quiet hours of the station, the soft change in light when morning slid into afternoon, the low hum of the refrigerator that never quite stopped. He slept deeper now, stretched out instead of curled tight, his body no longer braced for sudden loss. Caleb noticed everything. He noticed how August positioned himself when customers came in, never blocking the door, never crowding, just standing where he could see and be seen. He noticed how the dog flinched at raised voices, but didn't retreat. How he followed Caleb through the store without crowding his heels, matching pace like he had done it his whole life. What Caleb didn't notice anymore, until the absence finally registered, was August watching the road. The realization came quietly. A pickup rolled in late one afternoon, dust trailing behind it like smoke. Caleb glanced at the window out of habit, then looked down to warn August not to get underfoot. August didn't move. He was lying near the counter, head on his paws, eyes half closed. He didn't lift his head when the truck stopped. He didn't rise when the driver stepped out. The road no longer owned him. Caleb felt something loosen in his chest. Word spread faster than Caleb expected. A woman from a nearby diner stopped in one morning with a bag of biscuits for the dog, said like it was obvious the dog belonged there now. A man who hauled freight through the county began parking longer than necessary, scratching August's ears with a reverence usually reserved for good luck charms. Someone taped a hand-drawn sign near the register, "Be kind to animals." They remember. Caleb didn't ask who put it there. Marla checked in every couple of days. She didn't bring good news or bad news, just information. The flash drive had been real. The contents had been worse. Financial records, transfers, evidence of a long, quiet fraud that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with greed. "They're scared," Marla said one evening, leaning against the counter while August lay at her boots. "That's why they keep circling." Caleb frowned. "Circling how?" Marla's eyes flicked to the window. "Driving past, asking questions in town, testing who talks." As if summoned by the thought, a dark sedan rolled slowly by the station, windows tinted. It didn't turn in. August's ears lifted. His body stiffened, not in fear, but in attention. He rose and stepped closer to Caleb, standing where he could see the glass and the road beyond it. His tail stayed still. Caleb rested a hand on August's shoulder without thinking. Marla noticed. He knows. Caleb nodded. He always does. That night, Caleb locked the station earlier than usual. He pulled the chain across the door and turned the lights down low, leaving only the soft glow that marked the place as occupied. August paced once, then settled near the counter facing inward. Caleb sat on the floor with his back against the fridge, the cold humming through his spine. He hadn't done that since his son was small, since nights when the house felt too big and too quiet. "You could leave," Caleb said softly, not expecting an answer. "Plenty of dogs would." August looked at him, eyes steady. Then he walked over and sat down, close enough that their shoulders touched. Caleb swallowed. Later, long after the highway thinned and the desert reclaimed the dark, headlights flared again. Not the SUV this time, 2 cars. They slowed as they passed, one after the other, like scouts testing the perimeter. August stood silent, his body aligned with the door, not blocking it, guarding the space behind him. Caleb's pulse quickened. He reached for his phone and texted Marla a single word. Now. The cars didn't stop. They didn't need to. The message was already delivered. Marla arrived within minutes, sirens off but presence loud enough to matter. The cruisers pulled in from opposite sides, lights washing the lot in red and blue. The cars were gone by then, swallowed by distance. Marla didn't look surprised. "They're getting desperate," she said, "and desperate people make mistakes." Caleb nodded. "What happens next?" Marla glanced at August. Next comes the part where they try to reclaim what they think is theirs, legally, loudly. They'll say the dog is property, that you interfered. Caleb's jaw tightened. And the truth? Marla met his eyes. The truth is on camera, on record, and on a flash drive they shouldn't have put near a loyal throat. She crouched and scratched August's chest. You ready to be famous, big guy? August huffed softly and leaned into her hand, then looked back at Caleb as if checking whether fame was something to worry about. The hearing was set for the following week. Caleb hadn't been in a courtroom since jury duty years ago. He spent the days leading up to it moving through the station like a man preparing for a storm, securing small things, checking locks twice, memorizing where August liked to sleep. The night before the hearing, the SUV returned. It didn't pull in. It stopped across the road, lights off. Caleb saw it from the corner of his eye. His muscles tightened. August rose instantly, moving to the window without a sound. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He watched. The SUV stayed there for a long moment, engine idling low. Then the driver's door opened, and the man stepped out, silhouetted against the darkness. He didn't cross the road. He didn't wave. He just stood there, staring. Caleb's hand went to the phone again, but August did something unexpected. He turned away from the window. He walked back to Caleb and sat down, facing him, back to the road. He placed his weight solidly, decisively, as if drawing a line that couldn't be crossed. Caleb felt his breath leave him. The man across the road shouted something, words lost to distance and wind. Then he got back into the SUV and drove away, fast and angry, tires squealing as he disappeared into the dark. Caleb sank onto the stool behind the counter, legs weak. August remained seated, steady as stone. You chose, Caleb whispered. August didn't wag his tail. He didn't celebrate. He simply stayed. The hearing was small. No cameras, no crowd. Just a judge, a table, and the quiet weight of decisions that couldn't be undone. The man spoke first. He talked about ownership, about mistakes, about rights. The woman cried again, softer this time, less convincing. Caleb didn't speak until he was asked. He talked about the night August was left, about waiting, about the collar, about the way a living thing chose safety when it was offered without conditions. Marla played the footage. The room went silent. When the judge looked at August, sitting calmly at Caleb's feet, head resting against his leg, the decision didn't take long. This animal was abandoned, the judge said, and then used. He will not be returned. The man's face collapsed. The woman looked away. Caleb's hand tightened in August's fur. Outside, the sky was wide and clean, the desert stretching out like it always had. Cars passed. Life continued. Back at the station, Caleb unlocked the door and stepped inside. August walked in beside him. The road lay beyond the glass, endless and open. August didn't look at it. He went to his spot near the counter, lay down, and closed his eyes. Caleb stood there for a long moment, listening to the hum, feeling the quiet settle into something permanent. The road could keep its distance. They had everything they needed right here. Life didn't change all at once. It shifted in small, deliberate ways, like the desert after rain, quiet adjustments that only made sense when you looked back and realized the ground had softened. The station opened the next morning at 6, just as it always had. The coffee machine gurgled, the lights hummed. The register beeped when Caleb rang up the first customer of the day. But August was still there. He lay near the counter, not sleeping this time, just resting, head up, eyes open, present. When the door chimed, he lifted his head and watched, calm and observant as a man bought gas and nodded politely before leaving. No tension, no expectation, just awareness. Caleb noticed how natural it felt. He no longer wondered where August would go at night, or whether he'd disappear the moment Caleb turned his back. August moved through the station with the confidence of something that knew its place, not owned, not trapped, but chosen. Marla stopped by later that afternoon, paperwork in hand. Temporary guardianship, she said, sliding the folder across the counter. Pending final placement. Caleb flipped through it slowly, his fingers steady. Final placement? Marla's mouth curved. Unless you've got objections. Caleb glanced down at August, who had settled near his boots. I might. Marla laughed softly. I figured. She crouched and scratched August's chest, then looked up at Caleb again. He'll need a vet visit, chip registration, some boring things. Caleb nodded. I can handle boring. Marla stood. Good. Because this part's quiet. No drama, no chasing, just time. After she left, the station fell into its familiar rhythm. Customers came and went. The sun dipped low, painting the windows gold. Someone left a bag of dog treats by the door without saying a word. August sniffed them once and looked at Caleb, waiting. Go ahead, Caleb said. August took one carefully, then lay back down, chewing slowly, savoring it like something earned. That night, Caleb closed the station and didn't lock August out of the back room anymore. He brought in an old cot from storage, set it up beside his own small desk. August examined it, then chose the floor next to it instead. Caleb smiled. Figures? They fell into a routine that felt less like training and more like understanding. August followed hand signals without being taught. He waited at doors without being asked. He learned the sound of Caleb's keys, the way Caleb sighed when he was tired, the difference between footsteps that meant trouble and footsteps that meant nothing at all. Sometimes, late at night, Caleb talked. Not about the case, not about the people who had come back begging, about his son, about how he'd loved maps and always wanted to know where roads led, about how they'd driven this same highway once, years ago, windows down, the desert stretching endless and forgiving. August listened. He didn't whine. He didn't paw. He just stayed close, breathing steady, like the presence itself was an answer. The vet visit went smoothly. August stood still while he was examined, eyes flicking to Caleb only once, trusting. The chip scanner beeped. Empty. A clean slate. What's his name? The vet asked, pen hovering over the form. Caleb hesitated. August looked up at him. August, Caleb said finally. The vet smiled. Good name. It felt right now, not borrowed, not stolen, just settled. Weeks passed. The SUV didn't return. The sedan stopped circling. The town stopped whispering and moved on to other things, weather, school, gas prices. But sometimes someone would pause by the counter and look down at August with something like respect. That's the dog, they'd say quietly. Caleb never corrected them. One evening, as the sun dropped low and the station glowed warm against the cooling air, Caleb sat on the curb with August beside him. The road stretched out ahead, empty for now, the horizon wide and patient. Caleb took a breath. You know, he said, you don't have to stay here forever. August's ears flicked. There's land not far from here, Caleb continued. A house, quiet, room to run. August turned his head and studied the road, not with longing, but with consideration. Then he looked back at Caleb and leaned against his leg. The decision was gentle and unmistakable. Caleb nodded, a tightness forming behind his eyes. All right. They closed the station together that night. Caleb turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked toward the small house he hadn't lived in properly for years. August followed, paws crunching softly on gravel, tail low and relaxed. At the porch, August paused, glancing back once, not at the highway, but at the station, the place where he'd waited, the place where he'd been found. Then he stepped inside. The door closed behind them, not with a slam, but with a quiet, final click. Caleb stood in the dim kitchen and rested his hand on August's head. You're home, he said. August sighed, a long, content sound, and lay down at his feet. Outside, the desert night spread wide and silent. The road kept stretching into distance, carrying strangers and stories that no longer belonged to them. Inside, in a small house near a forgotten gas station, a man and a dog shared the kind of quiet that didn't ask for anything more. Before you go, I'd like to ask you something. If you were in that dog's place, what would you have done? Would you forgive, or would you choose the place that finally felt safe? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if stories like this matter to you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories waiting to be told. Stories about loyalty, second chances, and the quiet love animals give us when we need it most.